All right, so welcome to Rev Up. I'm Thomas. I am a practicing realtor, broker in charge for the South Carolina office and also North Carolina broker in charge. And I'm your instructor for this session of Rev Up. So thanks for joining in. We are going to talk about module number 5, module 5, which is the residential offer to purchase and contract. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an overview of the OTP. And as we have time, I'm just going to make reference to some other documents like seller disclosures and addendums or addenda. So as we always do, we have an affirmation today. I'm going to read it to you first, and then I would like for us to say it together. So today's affirmation, or for module 5, is money flows to me freely and easily from expected and unexpected sources. Now, why do we want to say this? Why do we want to affirm ourselves? Because we want our brain, all right, we want our brain to agree with our heart, right? We know that we're going to excel. Every day we're doing better. We're learning more. We're having experiences like Gina over the weekend, getting out there and doing it. There's no other training that can measure up to personal experience. So on 3, let's say this affirmation together, and you guys can go ahead and unmute. So 1, 2, 3.
Money flows to me freely and easily from expected and unexpected.
All right, great. All right, if we were in a classroom, I'd probably have you say that 2 or 3 more times, but hey, this is awesome. So, hey, I can tell you this is true. The unexpected sources, what you may not realize in the business of building a business, people will find out about you. People will talk about you, and that's what you want. You'll get referrals, and people will call you and won't tell you sometimes who referred them. They just come out of the blue. So what you're tracking is for your goals, but this unexpected kind of leads and conversions, closings, that all adds. That's why most times agents that are goal oriented will hit their goals before the end of the year. So, all right, come on. Let's go and talk about the learning objectives. So we're going to mention exclusive and non-exclusive buyer agency. Of course, the offer to purchase and contract, some contingency addenda that we use on a regular basis, some of the buyer and seller disclosures, mainly probably seller disclosures, what we're going to talk about. Counter offers and multiple counter offers is on here, but that's really another and deeper discussion. I will entertain any questions that you might have about those topics. All right. And then really the contingency addenda that I like to talk about is the, addendum is the additional provisions addendum. So the 3 main seller disclosures are the residential property, the lead-based paint, and what's the MOG or OMG, as some people call it? Oh my God. Mineral, oil, and gas, right? Okay. So let's start. So completing the sale paperwork. In order to complete the sale process, okay, we must begin by reading all of our contracts, okay? Reading all of our contracts, especially the blanks, right? Okay, because that's what agents are going to fill in. We know the other parts are not going to change, but those changeable parts of the contract, we had better notice because we don't want to miss something when we're speaking, negotiating, talking to our clients. It's key that you understand what each clause means. So some things you don't understand, Google it, ask your BIC, ask one another. Our job is not to explain legalese, okay? We don't do that. We refer people to an attorney. but the content that's in this document, we should know what it references. Okay, your ability to explain the contract to your clients will give them confidence, and that confidence will turn into commission dollars for you. Okay. All right. So we want to practice writing offers. This is what you're going to do with your mentor. For those of you that have mentors, is there anyone on here that's not in the mentorship program? Okay, so everybody's in the mentor program. All right, let's move on. Okay, so we don't have to come back to this. We usually do this at the end of the session. So my slide deck is very short because I'm getting ready to pull up the offer to purchase PDF. But who can tell me what the one habit is? What does it consist of? And if you can see my screen, I'll just give you some hints. The one habit is 336. Who can tell me? Who wants to take a stab at it? Okay. All right. Y'all are going to make me talk even more. Okay. So the 336, think of it this way. 3 calls. 3 calls every day. Okay. This is a minimum. This is a starting point, because at the end of 30 days, we're going to look back and you're going to have all this content. You're going to have all these contacts added to your database, and you're going to be working them. So you're going to make 3 calls. Okay. Preferably calls to people that you don't know yet or you're not doing business with yet. Okay. And then out of those 3 calls, you're going to add those 3 people to your database, because you're going to say, hey, do you mind if I just keep in touch with you? I'd like to maybe send you a newsletter once a month, or send you a market update. Anyway, you're going to add them to your database. And then the 6, you're going to write 6 handwritten notes. Handwritten notes set you apart. They fall in people's mailboxes with a stamp on them. That means people are more likely to read them, open them, whatever. So the 6, where did the 6 come from? Comes from the 3 people you just added to your database, and then 3 other people that are already in your database that you need to reach out to. All right. Any questions? All right. Let me get out of this. I just hate it when all the icons are all in the way. Man, I got a lot up here. All right. Who can see my offer to purchase document?
I could see it.
Okay, is that all you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, all right. So we have the offer to purchase and contract. I want you to take, let me see if I can minimize this a little bit. Take about 30 seconds and look over this page 1 right quick.
Can you make it bigger?
Well, if I do, you won't be able to see it all on one screen, will you? Maybe you can. How about that? That's 100%. Do I need to scroll? Okay, 30 seconds is up. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So, look, so I'm going over this document not to make you feel stupid, because it is fill in the blank, right? But there's a way to fill the blanks in, and that's what I want you to focus on. Hey, I was that agent. I was putting stuff in here. Yeah, it was probably the right information, but it needed to conform what the attorney wants to see at the end of the day. So let's talk about that. All right, so starting out, number 1, terms and definitions. The terms listed below should have the respective meaning given them as set forth adjacent to each term. Seller, buyer. So they make it real easy for us, who the seller is, who the buyer is. So they're going to say seller in bold, buyer in bold. Okay. Seller and buyer, if possible, we want their full legal names. The minimum would be Thomas is my first name, Lee is my middle name, so middle initial L, and then last name Watson, and then I'm a junior, so that would go on the end. So minimum first name, middle initial, last name. Okay, if possible. Sometimes I just have first and last name, and some people don't have middle names. But this will allow the attorneys to do a title search, to search, you know, there are different reasons why they need the full legal name, especially when they go to record the deed, but same with the buyer. Now, how do you get the full legal name from the buyer?
Sometimes it's on the MLS. If not, I guess I would just contact the seller's agent, because sometimes they don't disclose that.
Yeah, for the seller, you're gonna see it on the tax record, but you want to double check. I always email, if I'm writing a contract, I always email and say, hey, is this the right name? Now, if you're a listing and someone's submitting a buyer offer, an offer to purchase contract to you like this, they're going to have the buyer's name already on there. So go with what they put on there. It's up to that agent. If you're the buyer agent, it's up to you to put the proper name. Okay. All right. So we've got full legal names. If it's an entity, you put the entity name. Okay. All right. So let's go down. Property information is the next section. Well, it's actually still section 1, but note, there's a box that says note and it has blue around it. It's there for a reason. They want you to read this. It says if the property will include a manufactured or mobile home, buyer and seller should consider including the manufactured home provision in the additional provisions addendum, standard form 2A11T with this offer. What does that mean? That means if you're, and you should know if you're selling a manufactured or mobile home, all right, sometimes they're hard to figure out, but you will know automatically, you need to add form 2A11T, okay? What that is the additional provisions addendum, and there is a block on there they want you to check or X that it's a manufactured home. All right. Why? Because the lender's going to want this as well. They need to know what they're dealing with. And by the way, if you are making an offer on a manufactured home, please check with your lender and make sure they will lend money on a manufactured or mobile home. Some lenders will not. Okay. All right. So the basic information you want on here is you want the street address, 1234 Real Estate Drive. Okay. Not that one, but something like it. You want the city. Make sure the city's in here. I can't tell you, this section should not be empty ever. I can't tell you how many agents won't put the zip code or won't put the county. It's crazy. All right. So you want city, zip, county. Let's move on. The legal description. What I have populated is the minimum of what you should have on your offer to purchase. Okay. You're going to go down to where it's, well, first, if there is a subdivision name, please fill it in. Don't be that agent that leaves that blank, because this is very important, especially when it comes to homeowners associations and looking up CC&Rs. The attorney or the paralegal that's going to be working this at closing is going to have, they're going to need that information. Now, are you going to put this information in more than one place? Yes. It's all right to copy and paste, but don't think just because you put this information in one section, you don't need it in another. Nope. We need to replicate that. All right. The next is the PIN or PI, property identification number. Where do we find that?
Tax records.
Tax record and or the MLS record, right? But what's in the MLS, I go and check. All you got to do is hit a button. I go and check and make sure it's the same in the tax record. Okay. You want to double check behind the listing agent. All right. The other description, and I don't know why, I guess because legal description is diverse, but what we want is the legal description that is in the tax record. It is going to be a series of letters and numbers, most likely. If it's an older house or a rural area, the only house on the street, it's probably just going to say the address. Okay. But make sure you have the other description. And you want to make sure you go and find the deed book number and page number. And that is also found in the tax record. Down at the bottom, the last sale or the last time the property changed owners. All right, purchase price. When you put in the purchase price, do it just like that. Now, if you're using zip forms, which helps you populate these forms, it will give you the right format. But don't put 420K, please. Put 420,000. We want the math to look good. 420K, what does that mean? If we were to go to court in a dispute, yeah, we know that's slang per thousand, but we're not doing slang in a professional document. So 420,000. The due diligence fee, what I want you to note here is that most times we're going to have a due diligence fee, but make a note of this. Due diligence fee is due by what? Somebody tell me, when is the due diligence fee due?
Once you're under contract,
Yep.
your contract has been accepted.
What's the verbiage you're reading here in this description?
The effective date, which would be the when you sign it.
Okay. What you need to know, that's the effective date. Okay. The effective date is the date that both parties have signed. So if you, the buyer agent, sign this today and you turn it over and the listing agent gives it to the owners or sellers and they don't sign it until Wednesday, then Wednesday is the effective date. Okay. Everybody good on that? All right. This is important because we get this wrong a lot. So I want to make sure you guys understand it. And I'm saying guys, that's generic. I should say gals. There are no guys on here today. So, all right. The due diligence fee is made payable and delivered to the seller by the effective date by. You must select one of these boxes. Now, I will tell you, if you've been working with your buyer, you should be accepting or setting up expectations. I would personally, because it's more convenient and takes your buyer off the hook, is doing a wire transfer or electronic transfer. If the seller is in agreement, I've been doing Venmo or having my buyers send their due diligence by Venmo or some other electronic method. Now, I think it's pretty well accepted, but they can still, I would never do, if they're doing cash, your buyer has to deliver the cash that day. Okay. Nobody's doing cash anymore. Personal check or bank check. Yep. You need to get it in their hands immediately. And that's hard sometimes. But in this market, if you don't deliver it on time and they get a better offer, guess what? They can say, see ya. We don't have the due diligence. We're starting over. You lose. And unfortunately, they can do that. So I would do wire transfer electronic, because when they agree to that, when they sign it, even if the wire comes through a day or two later, that's on the bank. That's not on us. Okay. All right. Initial earnest money deposit is usually what we're going to check if there's earnest money. When might we have an additional earnest money?
No clue.
Additional earnest money, sometimes I don't see it too much now in this market, but additional earnest money could be, all right, we're going to give 2,500 now and then 2,500 after inspections. it really serves no purpose right now, but, or there may be a reason between the two parties why the earnest money should come later, or more money should come later. So anyway, just know that that's there. Don't see many assumptions or assuming the loan. Seller financing, not a lot of that going on, or a building deposit. Now, if you're doing a building deposit, you're probably buying a new house, you need to be using the new construction offer to purchase. Okay. There is an addendum. I think there is a new construction offer to purchase. All right. Then you want to make sure all of that math totals out or balances out correctly. And then I'm only going to say this once, but at the bottom of every form, your buyers need to initial. Okay. You will put your initials at the end of the offer to purchase. Actually, you will sign it, but the buyer initials need to go here. All right. So let's move on. We're filling in the blanks here. So escrow agent. All right, let's understand. So escrow agent here could be the title company or the attorney. Okay. It's the person it's the entity that's going to close it. So put the full name of the law firm. It's okay to put the name of the attorney and the law firm, but don't put just the attorney name, because sometimes they move firms. That's going to be an issue. I usually only put the firm name, because if I want that firm or that office to close it, even if specific attorney or certain attorneys move around and leave, that file still stays with that office. All right, let's move on down. We talked about the effective date. We talked about due diligence. Now, due diligence fee is a negotiated amount paid by the buyer to the seller with the contract for buyer's right to terminate the contract for any or no reason. Usually, in this market, it's we're doing it for the seller, right? Putting that due diligence up to try to get the seller to, I don't care what anybody says, but be swayed to take our offer, because it's more money in their pocket if we back away, right? We don't get it back. But anyway, moving on down, due diligence period. Two things I want to note: the due diligence period and the settlement date at the bottom of page 2. Make sure those are actual dates. Don't put 10 days after. That is, you're going to have to go back and change it when it gets to the attorney anyway. If you say 10 days after, it's not exact. And you see that big bold 5 letters at the end of the sentence after that blank? It says time being of the essence. If this is so important that they have to put time being of the essence, then you should have a date. Okay. All right. Same thing for the settlement. Settlement, a lot of times you'll see an offer, whatever, after. Here's the thing. Even if you're shooting in the wind up front and you just put your initial offer is, because you want it to be strong, like 14 days after. Well, due diligence should be the due diligence period, whatever. Just say 5 days after, and then settlement date is 14 days after. Once that's under contract, you will want to go back and initial and put the dates in and sign. Okay. So my point is, by the time the closing attorney gets this contract, there should be dates in here, and you're going to want that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I see you did your due diligence and the settlement date being 1 day apart. Is that normal? Because normally I would think that.
No, this is just for an example. This is a dummy sheet. So yeah, I probably should have made it real world, but what's real world today? Here's the thing, what I do know. Here's what I do know. Even if you have a cash buyer, I really doubt right now that a cash buyer can close before 14 days. Because guess what? The attorney has to close it, right? And guess what? They're booked up. They're not doing any 5-day closings. So as a matter of just a note, anything, the earliest you should put unless you call the attorney and get specific information on it, I would always put the settlement date 14 days after, or 14 days. Okay. All right. Did I answer your question, Gina? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I probably wasn't thinking when I hit that. So, but good call. You want to make sure those dates make sense. Okay, what we want to look at on page 3 is there's 2 warning boxes. And the second one I want to take note of, fixture and exclusions. So it says, warning, the party should not assume, you know what happens when we assume, right? And you really don't want to assume with your real estate license. So that an item will or will not be included in the sale based on an oral or written statement or understanding that it is not a part of this contract. Buyer and seller should be specific when negotiating what items would be included or excluded from the sale. So I don't care if Billy Bob told you when you went out to see the house or at an open house that, yeah, that chandelier will be included in the sale. It's an attachment, so don't worry about it. Or it's a fixture. I will tell you, if anything that looks out of the ordinary, even if it is a fixture and your buyer wants it, I'm writing it down. Because I've been in a situation where stuff has happened and people are like, no, can't you tell that's like a family heirloom that's not going with the sale? Well, you should have mentioned that on MLS. So there's the right thing to do on the listing side and the buy side, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to be good agents and we're going to notate. So that box is here for a reason. Don't assume anything, even what a fixture is. Now, you don't need to go in and put, like I see some agents, especially investors, we want the stove, the microwave. Well, we know that's a fixture, right? That's going to stay. But if it's something out of the ordinary, something that's hanging or something the buyer most likely put after the fact and you want it, like a basketball goal outside, that's going under personal property. Even if it's stuck in the ground, they could take it. I'm going to put it as personal property. Anyway, all right. That's my little rant. And if you don't know what specified items are, page 4 lists them for you. And we're not going to do that. Let you look at that on your own. Unpairing, deleting data from devices that you're going to leave in the house. Hey, that's just, you know what? You might want to mention this to your clients, but it's on them. If they want to leave sensitive information in an electronic that's attached to the wall, that's on them. But at least advise them that's not probably something they want to do. Okay, another note box. Bottom of page 4. Any fixture or other item described in subparagraphs A and B that will not be a part of the sale should be identified in subparagraphs D or E. So they just make sure you know exactly where to write this. Give me an example of items leased or not owned. Well, they give them there for us, don't they? So let's read them. Any item which is leased or not owned by the seller, such as a fuel tank, antennas, satellite dishes, receivers, appliances, alarm, security systems. Okay, if the seller doesn't own them, they need to list it here. So always ask about the security system. Hey, sir, ma'am, do you own the hardware on the wall that provides your security? Or does, the security company own it? So it's good to know. Because if the security company owns it, guess what? If the new buyer wants to use it, they have to call that company, right? Or have the company come and take it down. All right, other items that do not convey, which could be anything as crazy as a tree planted in the front yard. Okay, so let's move on. Personal property. This is the top of page 5. The following personal property present on the property on the date of the offer shall be transferred to buyer at closing at no value. So that's why now you don't have to put swing set that was on the property at the time of contract. They already have that verbiage there for you. So you see how detailed I am? The GE stainless steel dual door refrigerator. So there's no disputing it. That way, if the seller decides, 2 days after going under contract, they want to switch that stainless steel refrigerator for a black one and take the stainless, they can't do it. And wooden swing set, I mean, that's about as detailed as you can get. Well, anyway, as you need to be. Any questions?
No.
Okay. All right. And there's another note box right under personal property. Any personal property that would be a part of the sale should be identified in this paragraph. Okay. So these warning boxes, I really like them because they really tell us agents, if we're having like a, I can't say what I want to say, but anyway, if we're like, I'm not thinking well today. Okay. All right. That's what this means. All right. It tells you how to conduct the due diligence process. We've already talked about that a little bit. All right. This next blue box on the top of page 5, well, the middle, it says, note, buyer's obligation to purchase the property is not contingent on obtaining a loan. Therefore, buyer is advised to consult with the buyer's lender prior to signing this offer to assure that the due diligence period allows sufficient time for the appraisal to be completed and for buyer's lender to provide buyer sufficient information. All right, so here's what this means to me. This means when I'm writing an offer for my client, now I know if it's an FHA loan, if it's a USDA loan, or if it's a VA loan, that the appraiser, those types of loans may determine how long it's going to take for the appraiser to get out there, right? However, if I know my client is borrowing money from a lender, I'm going to put at least 21 days in my due diligence period for the inspections and the appraisal to come back. Okay.
Is that your normal? Because I always, people like not to give a number for that, because I always ask that question and it's like, oh, well, it all just depends. So your magic number for you for a due diligence period is 21 days.
If they're borrowing money, if it's cash,
Yes.
14. Yep. If they're borrowing money, the minimum is 21 days, because what you don't want to do is put 15 days and then day 14, the appraisal company calls and says, hey, we're going to be out there next week. So it gives you, and it's an acceptable amount of time. Some agents will say 30 days for for the due diligence period. In this market, that's not going to help you. But here's the point. It gives you time to hear back from the appraisal company. And if needed, you can ask for an extension. Now, in North Carolina, make sure you understand that the appraisal has to come back during the due diligence period. In South Carolina, the appraisal has its own what? Its own condition. It's a separate condition. So you can get through with inspections and move on, and you still have that appraisal contingency that hangs on there. So you don't have to worry about getting it within the due diligence day. But in North Carolina, you do. We want that appraisal to come back and know if we got a good appraisal or not. Now, if you're doing an appraisal waiver, probably doesn't matter, does it? But I would play the game like I would want the time like the appraisal meant something to my buyer. All right. Then your buyer is able to do these types of property investigations or inspections. You want to, really, you need to contact an insurance agent and see if that property is insurable. You need to request that your buyers talk to an insurance agent and receive a quote, so you know they're insurable. Any appraisal surveys, surveys take a longer amount of time. So if you want a survey to come back before closing, you really want to start that day one. Anyway, this is when you determine flood hazards, utility access, which really I would look at before I write an offer. Special assessments, fuel tanks, all of those are types of inspections. So we're going to skip on down on page 6 to subset G, where it says buyer's right to terminate. Provided that buyer has delivered any agreed upon due diligence fee, buyer shall have the right to terminate this contract for any reason or no reason by delivering to seller a written notice of termination. What is that written notice of termination? It tells you here in parentheses, the termination notice during the due diligence period or any agreed upon written extension of the due diligence period, time being of the essence. So if the due diligence period ends today, at 5:01 today, it's just too late, okay, to get an extension. So you want to make sure if your due diligence period is running out and you want an extension, I would be asking for that a couple of days before, or more. Don't wait until the day of. Sometimes you can't help it because that's when if you know the appraisal is not coming back or it's not back a couple of days before, I would go ahead and reach out to the other agent and ask for an extension. And it says if buyer timely delivers the termination notice, this contract shall be terminated and earnest money deposit shall be refunded to buyer. Okay. Subset G, this is all caps. So that means we need to read it. Closing shall constitute acceptance of the property in its then existing condition unless provision is otherwise made in writing. This is what kind of takes you off the hook for the most part when your client comes back and says, hey, there was something wrong with this property and you didn't find it or you didn't help me. Well, Mr. Buyer, seller, whoever you're representing, we went through all the inspection process and you signed a form, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, stating that you wanted to waive these inspections. So the inspections you waived, there's nothing I can do to help you because you waived the inspections. On the inspections that you had access to the inspection report. So, that kind of takes you off the hook. Buyer representations. So here's what I want you to make note of, the bottom of page 6. This is the funding part. And the box is kind of under this blue note box, but if they're getting a loan, you need to check the second block. If it's a cash offer, you need to check the top block. Don't leave these unchecked or unxed. Okay. And if it's a cash buyer, you need to X attached verification or proof of funds. And then if you X the loan, you should also have a pre-approval letter that is attached to your offer. All right. And then following that are the terms of the pre-approval. If it's their first mortgage loan and it's a VA, you want to have that type X'd out here. And then the principal amount, excuse me. And if they're using other funds, this is information you're going to get from the lender. So there's no guesswork here. All right. The other thing I want to note on page 7 is the subset B. Does buyer have to sell another property in order to obtain a loan? You're going to X does or does not. Okay. Now coming down under residential property owner's disclosure, association property disclosure statement, make sure you X one of these boxes. That you've received a copy of the North Carolina residential property disclosure, or you did not receive it, or it could be exempt. An example of a property that is exempt from a residential property disclosure is a foreclosure. Then you want to go down to the mineral oil gas part and do the same. Either you received a copy of it or not. Now, if you're a buyer agent, you want to look online on the MLS and see the attachments. If they attach those, you want to download them. If there's no attachments and you're making an offer, you need to be contacting that listing agent and saying, hey, we need a copy of seller disclosures. Now, you can sign them later, and that's why the block is there, has not received. So either way, just make sure you have to go back and ask for those and then go change that status. So we're going to go down to number 7 on page 8, seller representations. Make sure that you check one of these, the ownership period. That is going to be found on the MLS, the listing. And if it's a lead-based paint addendum needs to be attached. You check that block. And then that's if the house was built prior to 1978. Okay. That's why if you get out and read these line by line, you're not going to miss anything. The next section is the owner association and dues. This is want to make sure that at the top of page 9, top of page 9, you check this box and you specify the name of the association. So write the full name of the association, the dues, and how they're if they're paid annually or monthly or quarterly, and then if you can, get the name of the association manager, address, and phone number. Usually it's an email, phone number, and a name, but write those in there. Don't leave this blank. All right, we're going to go down to page 10, where it says under subset H, deed, taxes, and fees. So at the end of the statement, it says the deed is to be made to, and that's where you're going to go back to your buyers and put their full legal names. So Thomas Lee Watson Jr. and Jackie Diane Thomas. You're going to write it. And what I do, just to make sure there's no question about their status, is either domestic partner, married, divorced, separated. I would write those in parentheses beside it because it makes a difference in how they process this closing. And then subset I, agreement to pay buyer's expenses. We don't see this much now, but if seller is paying any of their closing costs, that's where the figure goes in here. And if you don't have anything, put either 0 or NA. By the way, we don't want to leave any blanks. It's either 0 or NA. It's NA on most of them. Down at the bottom of page 10 is the home warranty section. Make sure one of these blocks are checked. Either no warranty, or buyer is obtaining a warranty and wants a reimbursement, or seller has already provided a warranty. And then that takes us down to number 14 on page 11. So page 11 is a lot of legalese, but let me back up. Number 13 is talking about possession. If for whatever reason your buyer wants to do a possession before closing, or the seller is going to stay in the house after closing, which is a seller possession after closing, this is where you check and add those addendums or addenda. And those are standard form 2A7T, 2A8T. Now, where can you find those? Well, if you go and create your Zip Forms account, which you should have been advised to when you signed on with us, those forms will be, you can find all of the forms in there. SkySlope has the basic forms that we use. Those might be in there. I'm not sure. I haven't used these in a long time. All right. And it tells you number 14 are the additional addenda that needs to be attached. So think about this. If you know that you have an FHA buyer, there's an FHA financing addendum. If you know that the house is older than 1978, you need a lead-based addendum. So if you read through these are going to remind you. The additional provisions addendum is here again. Backup contract. I did one of these last month. So anyway, and then if the attorney has drafted any addenda for you, then you check the box right under number 14. It's kind of standalone. It says identify other attorney or party drafted addenda and write the name of it there. All right, and then that pretty much does it for page 11. Page 12, more legalese. And page 13 is our signature page. So on the signature page, make sure again that your client signs the full name and they put a date, okay? And if it's a corporation or a business, they go down to the bottom where it says entity buyer, entity seller, and that's where their information goes. There is a kind of a warning here about wire fraud. So just know what this verbiage means. You don't need to read this to your clients. Now, page 14. This is the one agents like to skimp out on, but it's the agent information. It's the listing agent and the selling agent, okay? Now, you know you're going to fill it out for yourself because you want all this information on there. But if you're the buyer agent, go ahead and fill out the listing agent information on here. Because look, it's not like you're doing them a favor or not. You're doing yourself a favor, our firm a favor, and the attorney a favor. By the way, I don't know if Amanda, when she does compliance, if you don't have this listing side filled out, she may send it back and say it's not complete. So while you're doing this, go ahead and fill out both sides. Now, where can you get the information for the listing agent if you're the buyer agent? In MLS. It takes about 2 minutes to click through, but you can get all this information. Now, here's the cool thing. When you send this buyer, when this goes under contract and you send all this packet to the lender, to the escrow agent, they're going to look on here like, oh, this agent squared away. They have all this information. Because guess what? That's where they're going to get their information at. And if it's not on here, then they're going to be emailing you. I need this. I need that. All right. And then brings us to page 15, which is the acknowledgement of receipt of monies. So remember that due diligence or that earnest money on page 1? Well, this is where you're going to acknowledge receiving it. Now, I would say this, as an agent, try to minimize you receiving a check for your clients. If possible, you want that money to go straight from the hands of the buyer to the hands of the seller. But there are some occasions where somebody's going to hand the check off to you and then you're going to take it to the attorney's office or you're going to mail it for them or something like that. So I would have a paper trail if you do that. But it says listing agent acknowledgement of receipt of due diligence fee. If you received it and then turn it over to your client, then you're going to be signing for it. And then it says seller acknowledgement of receipt of due diligence fee is where I would have them sign it. So I sign it receiving it, and then they sign it receiving it from me. Or maybe it went straight to them and all they have to do is sign it. And then the third one is escrow agent acknowledgement of receipt of initial earnest money. This is where the attorney or escrow agent is going to sign here.
I have a question. So this part of the contract will be signed after the offer is accepted?
Oh yeah. So thank you, Gina. So yes, basically what you see written in here is when you send the contract, is when it goes under contract. I, as the buyer agent, am going to fill out the pertinent information. And then after we go under contract, and then after the parties have received funds, I come back here and grab this page and send it over to the attorney and say, can y'all please sign this? Or I know that my client received the due diligence fee in their bank account. So what I try to do is get them to screenshot it in their account, and I save it in my record. And then I send this to my client to sign, and then I send it back to the listing agent and to the attorney. Does that make sense? So yes, you're going to have that. Usually everybody checks that up to 5 days, because it just gives them enough time to get earnest money to the attorney or escrow agent. So yeah, it's going to be after the fact. And sometimes attorneys will sit on these and wait to sign them. So it's okay as long as it gets signed, especially before closing. Any questions?
I know on December 3rd, they're going to have a class on Saturday for the South Carolina forms. Do we go through this during Rev Up for South Carolina or no?
So no, because Rev Up is designed, so it's a good question, and it's something we're looking at doing, almost like a Rev Up follow-up, Rev Up 2, that'll be more detailed, but we just don't have the time. Like, see, our hour has already run out. So it's a good question, and this is really where you get with your mentor or BIC, but we just don't have the time to go through both. But since we are a most of our agents are in North Carolina, so we go over the North Carolina forms primarily.
I found a YouTube video, a 2-hour YouTube video to go through it. But I do see there is a December 3rd class that they're going to just do South Carolina forms.
So yeah, let me get with Andrea, because we've talked about this. Let me see if there's something, a date out there, because yes, that would be very helpful. What I've done in the past is I've taken a South Carolina class like that just to catch up and maybe, hear some, sidebar comments on the way certain things are done in South Carolina. But let me touch base with Andrea on that. Before we leave, I wanted to, let's see, I just want to go into my inbox. Hold on. Thought I had
I
it
have
up.
a question, please.
Yes.
Okay, so the appraisal. I know the lender, if you are borrowing money, the lender will send a person to do the appraisal of the house. What about if it's a cash? Do we need an appraisal as well?
If it's cash,
Yes.
no, there's no reason to get an appraisal. The appraisal
Okay.
is for the bank or the bank and investor to basically to ensure that it's a property they're willing to lend money on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good question. All right, can y'all see my screen, my boxes? That says
Yeah.
addenda, agency, and disclosure. So when I go into addenda, I just want you guys to know some of the forms you might want to take note of are the additional provisions addendum, the backup contract addendum, the VA FHA addendums, and the lead-based paint addendum. If you want to screenshot this, and then you can go back and look for them in zip forms or SkySlope. And then when we're talking about agency forms, the ones I want you to take note of are the agency agreement and renewal, the confirmation of agency relationship, the North Carolina buyer agency, and the non-exclusive buyer agency. And I don't have time to go into it right now. We'll jump on it maybe when we're talking about submitting a buyer contract. But the exclusive buyer agency is what you want to try to get your clients to sign. That means they exclusively work with you. The non-exclusive buyer agency, they could work with another firm as well. Investors often want to use this so they can have multiple agents working on their behalf. And the first one who closes is the one who gets the deal, right?
Oh my God, it's funny. I've never heard of that form until right now. They don't teach us that.
It's rarely
Yeah.
used, and even with investors, the way I talk to them and tell them how I work. Look, for me, if they sign the exclusive buyer agency, and I'm even willing to tell them, hey, when you decide you don't want to work with me anymore, I'll tear it up or I'll terminate it. But be careful. Okay, so I'm the big, just make sure that, because the firm that you work with, the transaction belongs to the firm. So you want to run it by your broker in charge. But I think our philosophy here at Realty One Group Revolution is that you're the agent in charge of your business if you feel like that's the business decision you need to make. Now, there are some cases where a client will want to kind of fight us on something and we have to kind of hold to our commitments. And in some cases we may say, hey, Mr. Buyer, we understand you're not happy, but we're under contract and we're going to close this. We have an agency agreement with you. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. And then the last one is the disclosures. The professional services disclosure. You should be using this with every transaction. This is where your client will check yes or no of all the different inspections that they want. When you get them to check those and sign this, that's CYA for you. I had a good friend who was a client who closed on a house, a new build. A few months later, he called me, Tommy, you sold me a house where the driveway is on the neighbor's property. I said, oh yeah? All right, so go back and look in the file. Well, guess what? He waived the survey. So like, hey, Randy, you waived the survey. That's the only way we would have known. All right, yeah, you're right. Okay, but anyway, so he had to get.
And that was new construction?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
that happens. Yes, happens. So it doesn't happen all the time, but this was a property. This was Stonebridge Country Club, Golf Club down in South Union County. So yeah, I mean, you just never know. But anyway, just residential property disclosure. Of course, you need that to disclose the terms or the condition of your property when you're selling it, and your mineral oil gas rights goes with every offer. So screenshot that, save those, and we will talk about them later, or we will talk about them in the future. Crap. I'm trying to end my screen share. All right, stop share. Okay. Well, that was module 5. Thanks for participating, and I'll see you again in module 6.